July 9. My name is Svetlana Shiporenko, and Ukraine Media Center restarts its operation today. Let me remind you that we relaunched our operations in Urban 500 community space, and today is the day of grievance and commemoration due to the yesterday's Russians' massive missile strike on Kyiv. The debris is still being cleared, and we keep track of the situation. And now we will be talking about the preparation of Ukrainian athletes for the Olympic Games in Paris. Joining us in the studio is Vadym Guttsait, president of the National Olympic Committee in Ukraine. Good morning, Mr. Vadym. Good morning. So, Mr. Vadym, it has come to our knowledge that Ukraine got a couple of more permits. So what is the total number of permits for Ukrainian athletes for the Olympic Games as of today? And do we have any chances of getting any additional ones? Yes, recently we've got 3 licenses in grappling, female and male. Yesterday we got another additional permit for judo. There will be a female wrestler taking part in the tournament, and for the time being we have 124 licenses, which amounts to 140 athletes, both male and female, who will be taking part in the Olympic Games. We are already through the selection. We are finalized with our 124 licenses. We've submitted the most recent application recently because we had to do it until the 8th of July to the Olympic Committee. We should have led them or made them aware of the names of the athletes, and this is our result for the time being. So what will be the number of sports that Ukraine will be represented at, and what about the new kinds of sports? Well, almost in all, except for the game sports. Unfortunately, Ukraine only got a license for football, for team, talking about team sports, and hopefully the team is strong enough. We were talking about it with Mr. Ratan, the chief coach. We were discussing the presence of the best athletes, because it's important for us to have such clubs as Zorya, Shakhtar, Dynamo Kyiv, Ruch to give us their best players. It's difficult because they all have the calendar of tournaments. Some of the athletes play for the best European clubs who have their conditions for playing for Ukrainian national team. But I had a conversation with the chief coach, and as I've mentioned, he is worried. He wants the team to be represented at its best. And we were talking with Mr. Shevchenko, the president of Football Association, and the new management of the Association of Football, because they also want the team to be representing Ukraine at its best, so that Ukraine looks real strong. So we hope those will be good, strong players. But I've seen many times during the tournaments when the young players come, young athletes come, who aspire for the victory, who are thirsty for the victory. And maybe it's even better to have younger players who even want to win more, want to express themselves more, to demonstrate themselves more, because the Olympic Games now look different all around the world, because we're in the middle of the full-scale war. The world was a witness of yesterday's aggressors' attack. The way they did it yesterday, we felt it, in Kyiv. We were feeling it with all our beings, all that number of casualties, number of dead and injured, and still Ukraine will be represented in the Olympic Games under our national flag, and I'm sure the world will have a different view of Ukraine. So I wish our athletes raise our flag multiple times. So we got licensed for different kinds of sports. We even participate in break dance. We got 3 athletes selected for this kind of sports. Then sport climbing, we got another license for it. So I want to thank everybody who has taken effort to have Ukrainian team represented and its best. So getting back to football, why wasn't Ukraine represented in football previously? Because we have a pretty good team, I mean national team. Well, in Olympic Games, it's not like you either represent it or not. As you've mentioned, in Olympic Games, there are licenses. So this time, Ukrainian national team has got a license. They were selected and they ended up in Olympic Games. Unfortunately, we were not able to get selected to other team sports to get a license because the most recent time our team back in 2004, the national team on women's handball got the bronze, and it was the last time when a Ukrainian team got a license for team sports in Olympics. Just like in 2002, Ukraine was last represented in Winter Olympics with its hockey team. Well, given the fact that we're waging a war, that Russia keeps destroying our infrastructure, how was the preparation to the Olympic Games? How did it go? Well, first of all, thanks to the armed forces of Ukraine, it did happen. Because shouldn't it have been for the armed forces defending us, we wouldn't have any training and preparations at all. Well, it was difficult. It was difficult because more than 500 sports and athletic facilities were either partially or destroyed. A lot of them were left in the temporarily occupied territories. It was difficult because first half a year, almost all of the teams, those who were training for the Olympic Games, they were staying abroad because it's difficult to train when there are air raid alerts every day. And we've developed a guideline, recommendations, what needs to be done, what is the protocol of actions in case of air raid alerts, all those breaks, all those missile strikes. When there was a canoe championship of Ukraine, and during the final in Poltava, there was a missile strike right near the piste where Lyudmila Luzin, the silver medalist of global championship, had to perform. So this is the answer to your question: how do our athletes get prepared? How do they train? So since the very first day that I started heading the National Olympic Committee, we've developed that protocol of actions, how our athletes are going to behave in case of a red alert. Because again, some of them were staying in our Olympic games, some of them were training abroad. And we've created all of the conditions for them to stay abroad. Many countries wanted to help us. They were providing us with free training facilities, free meals for our athletes, the equipment. It was an unprecedented type of support, more than $500 million hryvnia if we convert it in hryvnia. This is what that support amounted to approximately. And we've made it once again. I want to emphasize it thanks to the armed forces in Kyiv, in other regions of Ukraine, in the west, where we were able to continue training. Some of the athletes keep training abroad because there are no proper conditions in Ukraine. But again, 124 licenses, 140 athletes. This is the result during the full-scale war, full-scale invasion. This is the result of our athletes and our coaches. And let's hope we will be able to get medals during the Olympic Games. Well, the athletes of aggressor country and Belarus, who supports them, will be performed under neutral flag. The National Olympic Committee sent a letter to the Global Olympic Committee with evidences of support of the war by Belarus. Was there any reaction on their end? Well, we've started this work from the very first day of the full-scale invasion. It didn't start with this letter, it didn't start with the fact that those athletes, they are not neutral, that they support the war in Ukraine, the war of Russia in Ukraine. And thanks to the Global Olympic Committee, they provided the recommendations for all of the Olympic and non-Olympic games to hold the Russian and Belarusian athletes back from participating in the championship, but in the Olympic Games. But we were gathering those evidences for these 2 years of their support of their Russian aggression. And as I've headed the Olympics Committee, I joined all of the meetings with the president of the Global Olympic Committee, with the presidents of the Olympic committees of the countries of the world. And there, when the discussion started about violation of human rights, that yes, the country is guilty, but the athletes are not. And there are some recommendations provided by United Nations experts about human rights violation, that the athletes can perform under neutral flag if they don't support the war. They can use the neutral banner during their national championships and Olympic Games. So I've worked through that issue. I was taking part in the summit of ministers of the countries of Europe that was also supported by our President Zelensky, who urged everybody not to allow the Belarusians to perform. But the world is not homogeneous, and we were working on this matter with the presidents of other national Olympic committees and, in sports, international sports federations. There are those who provided recommendations to make sure that even if those neutral flag athletes are allowed to participate, still they wouldn't have enough time to prepare for their participation. And Sebastian Coe, the head of Light Athletics Committee, who met President Zelensky recently, he was taking part in, or he was present in the Light Olympics Championship in Lviv recently. Light athletics is called the queen of athletics because it has 48 different sport disciplines, and there will be more than 2,000 athletes from all over the world representing their countries in light athletics in the Olympics. And he prevented Russians and Belarusians from taking part in any light athletics championship. And I hope this will serve as an example for everybody to prevent them from performing anywhere in any championship. So you cannot even imagine how much work was done in order to prevent them from participating in any athletic championship all around the world. And we've made it. I hope it's our victory, victory of Ukraine, victory of all those who provided their inputs to make sure that Russians and Belarusians do not take part in the Olympic Games. There will be no anthem, there will be no flag, there will be no athletes opening the Olympic Games. When all of the world will be watching the opening, will be watching their teams opening their games during the ceremony, and now we see that they start refusing to participate because all that information that we were able to gather, we were forwarding it to the International Olympics Committee to prove that they are supporting the war, the Russian athletes. And then the committee has taken our evidences into consideration, plus they have taken into consideration some additional information from other sources, and they have not admitted the best athletes from those countries, but rather they've still admitted those who are not really able to compete. And the latest refusal came from the Russian wrestling team. They refused to take part in the championship in the Olympic Games. So other already cases of disqualification of Ukrainian athletes as a result of their refusal to shake hands with Russian athletes. In case it happens during the Olympic Games, are there any recommendations coming from our National Olympics Committee for our athletes? Well, all of the world was able to witness the case with Olga Harlan on the 27th of July when she was on the piste. You know, she refused to shake hands with the Russian athletes. And a day before, I negotiated it with the head of the fencing federation. You know, they will just strike the blades of one another without shaking hands, and there was a consent on their end. But unfortunately, there was a provocation on part of Russian athletes, and we all perfectly remember that. After that case, I personally and the president of Fencing Federation, Mikhailo Ilyashev, we were meeting. Mikhailo was offline. He was a part of the. He was supporting the team in the championship, and I was online. You know, there was a lot of claims to my work. You know that Harlan was disqualified, and I'm sitting on my chair, so to say, and still I knew what to do. It's easy to speculate when you sit in your armchair, but again, during the global championship, they've already allowed them not to shake hands, and later when our athletes were coming across Russian and Belarusian ones, they continued to refuse in shaking hands. And right after the fencing championship, we all remember the committee provided a license for Olga to take part in the Olympic Games, and me with the head of the Judo Association, Mikhailo Koshlyak, and with Yuri Kopinko, we were working on the conditions, you know, the mandatory conditions of different sports federations where there are mandatory requirements to shake hands. And we negotiated them all where we were allowed not to shake hands with Russian and Belarusian athletes. You know, we were like concerned about this matter. It was important for us, and we were working on it. Because in those recommendations that we've developed in coordination with the Ministry of Sports and Youth Affairs, there are recommendations not to shake hands, not to communicate, not to take joint photo pictures, do not stand together. We don't notice them at all, because for us in a situation like this, what's necessary is the safety and security of our athletes. We have to avoid or prevent any provocations against our athletes. So our athletes are supposed to control the space to avoid any provocations against them. Previously, the president of International Olympics Committee mentioned that the Russian and Belarusian athletes will be disqualified for political statements made during the Olympic Games. And is it the same for us? Does this condition work for us? Because I'm sure our athletes are going to use Olympic Games as a platform for their statements. We will have Olympic house called Vola Space opened in the Olympic Games, and our motto for Olympics will be the will to win. So in the Ukrainian house, every single athlete will be able to make any statements they deem necessary, and I'm sure that every athlete will make that statement. They will state how they thank the Ukrainian armed forces and how they feel deep inside them that we have to make it against the aggressor country. And just yesterday, we've seen Elena Svitolina, who after the game broke in tears because of what was going on in Ukraine and how she was applauded. So I'm sure our athletes are going to make their statements, but during the competition and in the Olympic Village, we understand that we will be under the microscope of Russian media. There will be a lot of attention to the Ukrainian national team. This is why in the Olympic Games, I wish our athletes compete and win and raise the flag, because I'm sure that in many cases their statements may not be heard, but as they raise the flag, the world is going to understand that Ukraine keeps standing, that Ukraine was, is, and will be there. So hopefully the Ukrainian national team is going to express themselves in medals, and the Ukrainian house will be a place for them to make any personal statements. Do we have any questions on the floor to our guest? So, Mr. Vladimir, what will be the connection between Paris and Ukrainian mass media? Because we're here in the vacuum. Well, we're not going to end up in information vacuum. We have accredited journalists. We worked on that matter for the last year. There will be journalists present there. There will be TV broadcast of all of our competitions. National Olympic Committee, our media team will be working there in Paris, and they will cover all of the events that will be unfolding there. So let me assure you, there will be no information vacuum. Everybody will see our performances, our victories, the victories of our athletes. So join us, Kyiv track of what we're going to broadcast, and I can even invite you to the Olympic Committee, where you will be properly briefed on how to keep track on the events. So thank you, Mr. Vladimir. Thank you for all of the support you've expressed for your athletes, and I wish we see our athletes after the Olympics in our studio. Thank you very much, and I wish all of our society roots for our athletes, to support our athletes, and in case they don't make it, because it's sports. Unfortunately, the gold medal is only one, and even if our Ukrainian athletes don't make it getting the gold medal, still keep supporting them. I was saying this during the Euro Championship. They are our athletes, so let's all join and support our athletes. Well, I completely support your urge, your call, so we will support our athletes with all of Ukraine. And we will continue our operation at 12 o'clock. We will have an announcement of a comprehensive study on pertinent inherent relation issues in Ukraine. Thank you. Stay tuned.